All right, we're back. Once again, apologize for the internet connection. I'm in Bangkok today. But yeah, let's jump right back into it. So today we have Grayson Earle on the show. He's the creator of Bloc, which is described as a computer program that bails people out of jail. And my understanding is this relates to Monero because Monero is the currency that's used for the mining purposes of raising the funds, and I guess is also the money that's actually donated to the cause. So thanks for coming on the show, Grayson.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
But I did a little research, and I've noticed this isn't your first creative technology project, so maybe we could get into some of those as well. But before we jump into those, do you mind, I guess, giving a quick background about yourself and telling us what exactly is Bloc, if I didn't describe it correctly?
Sure. No, I mean, you got it. But yeah, I mean, as far as my career and all this, I guess I typically describe myself as an artist. And up until September of this year, I was based in New York City. I've been in Ohio for this academic year as a visiting professor of studio art. And I actually taught a class on cryptocurrencies and sort of economic interventions. And as far as Bloc goes, it's a distributed cryptocurrency mining project that directs the resources generated, 100% of them, to bailing people out of jail, and more recently to paying immigration bonds for people held in detention by ICE.
Okay, so what compelled you to start this project, and why Monero?
Well, I mean, there's kind of a trajectory to the project, of course. Like many people, I have a almost got rich in Bitcoin story where I was in graduate school and was managing a computer lab, and this was in 2010, I think. And of course, heard about Bitcoin. It may have been 2011. Anyway, heard about Bitcoin and was really intrigued by this idea of mining, this process that sort of like potentiates the entire process, incentivizes the level of participation that keeps the ledger up and attaches new blocks. And so I installed a script on some of the computers that I was managing that would run at night. And I did this for like 2 weeks or something. And it was before Bitcoin was really worth anything. I think it was worth like, I don't know, $10 or $20 at the time. So it was really just a labor of love. And I think I mined like 2 Bitcoin and then forgot about it. And then many, years later, when I sort of like heard about Bitcoin again, now that it was worth like, thousands of dollars or something, I was like, oh, okay. Or maybe $1,000. This is really interesting that, we're able to sort of just generate value out of thin air. Of course, it helps that the value shot up drastically. And then I was also really inspired by this project that was created by people at the Berkeley SETI labs. So SETI, for anyone who's unfamiliar, stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And, before you start thinking that I'm like a loony, this is an organization that was started by Carl Sagan and Frank Drake. And, it's essentially a part of NASA. I'm not sure what the relationship is, but, and they have a large satellite array aimed into the stars, and they sort of listen for signs of intelligent life out in the universe. And I guess at some point in I want to say the late 90s, early 2000s, they experienced a kind of a funding gap. And so the Berkeley arm of SETI, as far as I understand it, developed this software called SETI at Home, which was basically like software that you could download as an individual and then run on your computer, and it would use your idle compute cycles to sort of take in that raw data from the satellite array and crunch it and then send it back to researchers in a usable format. And this basically, created an ad hoc supercomputer. So rather than pay money to rent time on a supercomputer or something, they had a network of volunteers do this work. And so not only is it like volunteering, it also means that these people have some stake in the project. They're collaborators now. And then when Donald Trump was elected president, for me, it was just kind of like, we have to drastically rethink our engagement with the internet. And I, sort of like, made me want to get involved. And so, not that I wasn't already involved, but, I was thinking about organizations like Black Lives Matter and Planned Parenthood and Greenpeace, who were going to be affected by his presidency in particular. And so it's just thinking about new ways of generating resources for those existing organizations. And then I teamed up with the New Inquiry and some really great people over there, like JB Rabinowitz and Sam Levine and Maya Ben-Yam and Rachel Rosenfeld, and basically and Francis Sang, and we decided that it would be most beneficial if the sort of target for the project was bail. And this is for a number of reasons, but I suppose I'll give a pause for a second and address the question about why Monero. And for me, I mean,
actually, before you get into the why Monero, because now I'm interested in this path. So the group that you were with that's working on it, that was the Illuminator group, or that was?
Oh no, it's the New Inquiry.
The New Inquiry, and so they were the ones that kind of helped generate the concept of using this for bailing people out, as opposed to using it for some other good cause.
Yeah, I think at the time I was considering some bail funds like the Black Mama bailout. But yeah, the New Inquiry, the folks there really sort of like, they're journalists and they have an eye for strategy. And so they shifted the focus to be entirely about bail, which I think is the right move. And that's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one is just like, just about efficiency, because bail works on a revolving fund, which means that if you pay bail for someone, if you post someone's bail and they meet the requirements of that bail, meaning they don't skip town or something, then the money comes back to you in full at the end. So you can use that money to bail out another person and another person. And I think in New York State, where we were operating out of to begin with, I think it's 94% of the time the bail comes back in full. We don't try to harp on that aspect too much, because we think that regardless of whether or not you're a supposed flight risk or you do skip town, you still deserve to have the same level of access to resources to meet bail that a rich person does, or whatever. It's really just about leveling the playing field and sort of pointing to the sort of inherent injustices in the justice system.
Gotcha. And so, jumping then into the meat of the topic and why most Monero people are listening, I would assume, is why did you guys decide to use Monero for this purpose?
Well, I mean, at the time, it was just the one that had the most, the highest efficiency of sort of like power usage and the types of computers that you could use. It being ASIC resistant meant that our target audience of maybe like MacBook people or like casual computing individuals could run a mining application, and it could compete with larger mining projects, unlike Bitcoin or something where we would just be lost. We wouldn't be able to generate any resources really if we were just using CPUs and stuff like that. And also it was holding its value pretty steadily. So that to me was interesting. And then as we started to like develop the project further, I mean, there was the moment where, see if I can get this story right. Maybe you can correct me, but I think Fluffy Pony sort of made some promise or alluded to some kind of like major development right around the time that a lot of development teams were doing this to like sort of make the value shoot up. And so he kind of like trolled the speculators a little bit. And then, when the announcement came, it was just a sort of like a funny troll video. And I sort of like that because, it means that the currency is about more than just sort of like hyper capitalist speculation. It's kind of, it's got some soul to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good description. And Fluffy Pony got a lot of flack for that, but I think it did kind of steer the ship and set the course correctly in that it's more about, pumping up the price. It's about actually building something that people can use as digital cash. And I think he was, in his own way, trying to remind everyone of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I respected that move personally.
Okay, great. So what are your feelings on cryptocurrency overall and Bitcoin and Monero? Do you have an opinion on that?
I definitely do. I mean, I feel sort of conflicted about it, to be honest. I'm really into this idea of creating an alternative to the way, economics have been run for the past, I don't know, since the inception of capitalism and banking and even before that, I suppose. And the idea of smart contracts sort of replacing white collar labor in the same way that automation has replaced blue collar labor over the past century and a half or something is also interesting to me. But I always ask people at these crypto conferences, like, how revolutionary can this new financial system be if it's just going to benefit the same cast of characters? And that's kind of what we've been seeing in terms of who's getting rich from this, right? It's like a bunch of white dudes and early adopters who have capital essentially, or they're already technically proficient or something. But a real revolutionary economic or financial system would be sort of benefiting people that have historically been denied these sorts of privileges. So I think it's time for the crypto community to start asking difficult questions about how to build in equity as like a foundational part of the currency, which is totally possible when you have something like a smart contract system, right? You could guarantee the right to strike or something, and this could prohibit the flow of capital. You could correct the wage gap. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. So I think that the possibilities are really great, and I'm just a little bit off put by the speculation and the sort of recapitulation of capitalism in cryptocurrencies personally.
You're breaking up a little bit. Hopefully not for the the viewers, only for me.
Oh, right.
But to jump into another question related, I saw that you're related to the Dark Inquiry. This, I guess, it's this group of technologists that if you mind talking about it a bit, but it sounded like a group of technologists that kind of look at the darker side of technology and its potential negative impacts. And I was wondering if that's a correct assessment of the group, and whether or not you guys ever looked at crypto from that perspective, particularly Bitcoin, with it being open and transparent and lacking privacy and fungibility. And if this becomes kind of the new world money, is that potentially a dystopian thing where everybody is transacting on this open ledger for the whole world to see?
Excuse me. Well, as far as the Dark Inquiry is concerned, and this, we always kind of talk about whether the name is appropriate because it's a bit confusing, among other things. But the sort of dark aspect is supposed to be in reference to us as this kind of like shady, clandestine group of ethical hackers, sort of like anarcho-socialist hackers or something. And it's a collective that's sort of the New Inquiry software vertical or something. It came out of the New Inquiry, and the first project is called White Collar Crime Risk Zones, and it's a really interesting project. I was not involved with that project, by the way. It's basically like, I don't know if you've ever looked at one of these crime heat maps, where it's like you're moving into a new area. It's basically like a tool for the gentrifying class typically, and you'll type in like some address in Brooklyn or something, and you'll get like a heat map of where all of the crimes have been committed recently or something. And this is supposed to like assist you in finding where you ought to rent a house or something. And so they created White Collar Crime Risk Zones, which is like the same sort of idea of a heat map, but everything is like red hot in the financial district in New York, and it shows what sorts of white collar crimes were committed, who was defrauded, people who had their homes foreclosed on, like points to like who did that, and then does a composite of all of the faces of who might be committing these crimes. And of course, it ends up looking like just some everyday white dude. And so we think of ourselves as making rhetorical software, meaning like software that mounts an argument in and of itself. And so Bloc was the second project out of the collective. And as of now, we don't have a third. It's kind of, a lot of people who are academics or have day jobs and stuff. So it'll probably be a little while till another project comes out from the collective.
So is it Well, maybe we can answer that question anyway. Do you have any opinion on the potential, you know, dystopian-like future that something like Bitcoin can create versus a protocol like Monero that's fungible and private at the base layer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is good reason to have a totally anonymous and private way to spend and move money around, you know, especially like looking at the way the world is sort of headed right now, being able to transact resources without the state or corporations sort of knowing what you're doing could be useful potentially. But, you know, it's also important to remember that for a lot of people in the world, they're already living in this dystopia that we're describing where they are under the thumb of the police and the state. And, you know, these are typically like marginalized brown and black communities in America or like in the third world. And so, you know, I bring it back to my sort of like criticism of cryptocurrency or hope for cryptocurrency, which is like, how do we make it actually a revolutionary financial system? Like these things, anonymity and privacy and all this stuff, like that's important. But what would be really revolutionary is if we are sort of like banking the unbanked and giving real power to all people.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Yeah, I personally, I mean, I see crypto, just its first use case being sound digital cash. And then those things you're talking about would hopefully grow from that as it proves itself as being this sound digital cash that's censorship resistant. And then my thesis from there is that I just think Monero has the fundamentals that would allow it to do that the best versus some of these other coins.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it seems to correct a lot of the problems that the, you know, first generation crypto stuff had for sure.
All right. Yeah, I think we should cut it here only because we have this poor internet and I have people walking around the lobby. And I would love to have you on again, though, if you're open to it in the future. We could talk more about the state of the project and if you're working on anything else crypto related.
Yeah, definitely. I've got some fun stuff in the pipe. Maybe, you know, maybe collaborating with some of the Berlin people. I won't say who, but we've got some fun ideas over at, you know, Trust and Full Node and stuff. But yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. And for anyone listening that's interested in hearing more about the project, it's bailbloc.thenewinquiry.com or just bailbloc.com. It's BAILBLOC. And you can either, you know, sign up or you can just read more about it. And yeah, I super appreciate being invited to be here. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to mention any other websites that you're associated with, now would be a good time.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, there's also the Illuminator. That's people might get a kick out of that. It's a high-powered video guerrilla projection outfit. We basically like project political messages onto places like Trump Tower and whatever, you know, and in New York City, but also the rest of the world. So that's a fun one. Theilluminator.org.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. I think this project, the fact that you've chosen to use Monero is kind of a testament to Monero working. I hope you see that as being the same.
Yeah,
I hope Monero continues to live up to that use case.
Hey, me too. The better Monero does, the more people we can get out of jail. So let's do it.
Well, thanks again. I'm going to cut this off only because there's a lot of distractions over here. But
Gotcha.
We'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Have a good one.
You too.